Brother-in-law confessed his love for my wife. Now I'm torn between exposing him to my sister and protecting our family bonds. Yesterday, my world got turned upside down. My brother-in-law, seemingly out of nowhere, reached out to my wife asking if she could meet him for lunch. There was something he needed to talk to her about, he said. Before she even agreed to go, she told me about it. She wondered if maybe there was some trouble between him and my sister, maybe he wanted a woman's advice, or needed to speak to someone he trusted outside of his marriage. I'll admit, I found it odd, but we have a close family, and our lives are intertwined. I told her to meet him and find out what was going on. They met for lunch the next day at a place near her office. That's when everything took a nosedive. He laid it all out for her, pouring out feelings that should never have existed in the first place. He told her he was in love with her, not just a passing attraction or a harmless infatuation, but a full-blown obsession, apparently. He went on and on about how beautiful she is, how she makes him feel, what he'd do for her if she were his. He even claimed it was love at first sight. This is a man who has been married to my sister for years. They have 2 kids together. Our families see each other often, we're all close. He and my wife have had a friendly relationship, but I never saw any lines being crossed. Sure, he texts her often, but he also calls and texts my mother. That's just who he is, or who I thought he was. I want to make it absolutely clear, my wife isn't cheating on me. We share an iPad and I've seen every message between them. We look at each other's phones all the time. There's never been anything beyond ordinary family texting. She didn't even let him finish whatever speech he'd prepared. She walked out, called me immediately, and told me everything. While she's on the phone with me, he starts frantically texting her. He says he didn't mean it, tries to brush it off as infatuation, sends message after message, calls her repeatedly. She ended up leaving work early and coming home, her phone still blowing up with his desperate attempts to reach her. When she got home, I told her to answer one of his calls and put him on speaker so I could hear. He was sobbing, begging us not to tell my sister. He claimed that during the weekend, when we were all together, he thought my wife was flirting with him. He said he believed they shared a moment when they were alone in our kitchen. Now, my wife has a big personality, she teases and jokes around, maybe that got misinterpreted. But to me there's an ocean between playful banter and what he just did. He asked if she'd told me, and I answered for her, as I was right there, yes, I know everything. That only made him more frantic. He started begging me, crying, pleading for us to keep this between us. I wanted to get to the bottom of things, so I asked him directly if he had ever cheated on my sister before. He swore on his kids' lives that it was just my wife, that it was a one-time thing, and that I should understand. That's where my patience ran out. I told him I wasn't going to do anything tonight and that I'd call him tomorrow. That's the last thing I said to him. Now I'm left here. My wife is telling me to get in the car and tell my sister, right now. But the idea of shattering her family tears me up inside, and thinking about what this might do to my nieces makes me physically sick. I know the right thing to do is to tell my sister. There's just no other way forward. But I'm also thinking about my wife. Even though she did nothing wrong, there's a real chance my family could hold resentment toward her. Even if my sister decides not to divorce him, nothing between our families will ever be the same. This episode could destroy everything we've built for years, tear our entire family apart. I couldn't care less about him. He tried to blow up my family for his own selfish reasons, but I do care about everyone else caught in the crossfire. I have no idea what to do now. My mind is spinning. Any advice would help. Update 1. A little after midnight last night, my phone rang. It was my sister. Immediately, I could hear the strain in her voice as she said she needed to talk to me. She had to let me know that my wife had tried to start an affair with her husband. Apparently, he was pinning everything on her, trying to dodge the blame. I told her that wasn't the case and that I'd be right over. Heart pounding, I woke my mom and dad, explained the frantic mess unraveling, then roused my younger brother. My parents headed to my sister's house to look after her kids, and my brother came over to mine to watch over ours. My wife and I jumped in the car and headed over. When we arrived, my sister and her husband were waiting on the front porch. My brother-in-law looked completely defeated. He knew we had the texts and voicemails. I couldn't figure out what he thought he would achieve with all these lies. My wife handed her phone to my sister, who scrolled through the texts, listening to the voicemails as her husband broke down into sobs before she could even speak. Watching this huge, tough firefighter, someone you'd never expect to see cry, shatter like that made the night feel even more surreal. But my sister didn't budge. She told him to stop, to pack his things, and to go. She said she couldn't even bear to look at him. He kept begging, but she was stone cold, her patience gone. She turned to talk privately with my wife. I saw them hugging, a surge of relief flickering through me. They've been close friends since college. My wife and I met through her. The idea that this hell could destroy their bond had weighed on me all night. That left me with my brother-in-law. Watching him so broken, I couldn't muster up as much anger as I'd expected. He apologized, claimed he just couldn't help it, said my wife was easy to fall in love with. I understood in some way, but still, damn. Eventually, he dragged himself off into the night. We spent the rest of it at my sister's. My sister peppered my wife with questions, desperate to understand why her husband had thought any of this could lead anywhere. She said they hadn't been having issues, nothing off, nothing suspicious. My wife was in tears, insisting there was nothing between them that anyone hadn't seen. She handed her phone over again and together she and my sister read back 2 years worth of messages. Nothing came up, just the playful banter that my wife shares with everyone, even with my mom and younger brother. The only thing that stood out was a moment in the kitchen over the weekend. They both reached for the fridge at the same time, playfully jostling. He let her win, but then, in grabbing a beer, reached around her waist just a little too slowly and too intimately, enough to make her uncomfortable, but she hadn't called him out, thinking it best not to make a scene. She worried maybe that gave him a sliver of hope. At least my sister didn't blame her for any of it. Then, desperate for answers, my sister grabbed his MacBook, guessing the password on her first try. Frantically, she scoured the drive and unearthed countless photos of my wife. The images spanned years, always of her alone. There were at least 50 from a Caribbean trip we'd taken as couples, a trip where, for once, my wife had worn a bikini, thinking nothing of it since it was adults only. He'd been secretly snapping photos of her for years. Suddenly, the situation turned from devastating to outright disturbing. I couldn't help but think, is this where restraining orders come in? This had crossed a line into creepy territory. I'm not sure what happens next, but I know there's more to uncover. I'll be back with an update once I know where this is headed. Update 2. It honestly helps my wife feel better that virtually everyone around us considers her blameless in all of this. It means a lot to her, and I'm grateful for it too, but unfortunately, the mess only seems to grow. Last night, my sister agreed to finally confront her husband and let him explain everything. She put my wife on FaceTime during the conversation, so there would be no room for lies or manipulation. I listened in as well, off camera, and my sister made sure to record the entire thing. That's when it all came spilling out. He admitted right then that he's been obsessed with my wife for years. It started the first day he met her, back when my wife and I were still just dating. My wife and sister have been close friends for a long time, so my sister wanted to introduce her boyfriend to the important people in her life. As it turns out, he met my wife before he ever met me. At first, he claimed, it was only physical attraction, but over time he knew it was something more. My sister almost kicked him out right then and there. She was shaking with anger, barely holding herself together, but she forced herself to listen a bit longer. Then she asked him what in the world could make him think my wife would ever leave me for him. His answer made my blood run cold. He told her there was obviously mutual attraction, and he figured it would probably start as an affair, then progress from there. At that point, both my wife and my sister erupted. There was yelling, a lot of cussing, a lot of tears. The call ended abruptly. My wife hung up because she was worried about me and how I was handling it. She was shaken to the core, distraught, but she looked me dead in the eye and assured me any attraction was completely one-sided. I have never doubted her for a second. Even if she found someone else attractive, I know she'd never act on those feelings. She just isn't the type. Early in our relationship, I remember once she caught me admiring her while she was getting dressed. She laughed for a second, then her look changed and she warned me, "Don't ever fuck up, or you'll never see any of this again." She was joking, sort of, but the message was clear. She is absolutely serious about trust and loyalty. I always thought my brother-in-law was a little cocky, but I could never have guessed he had this kind of delusion about himself, that he could break up our marriage and have a chance with my wife. The arrogance still shocks me. Later, I spoke with my sister, and she's already planning to talk to a lawyer on Monday to see what steps she can take to limit his contact with her kids. As far as she's concerned, he's lost touch with reality. That's all I've got for now. I'll update again once the dust settles a bit. Update 3. Anyway, my brother-in-law returned home yesterday, not because my sister wanted him back, but because she can't legally stop him. They are done. I think even he realizes that now. According to her lawyer, with all his bizarre behavior over the past few days thoroughly documented, there's a good chance my sister will be granted full custody. He doesn't even seem interested in fighting her on that front. My sister will be fine. Whatever love she had for him is gone, and honestly, she doesn't seem too broken up about it. The kids still don't know what really happened. Yet, even before all this, my brother-in-law was hardly around when the kids were home. He used to sleep at the fire station on many nights, racking up endless overtime. Still, it's going to be rough for the kids once they realize how much everything is about to change. Some people might wonder if there have been other women, but as far as we can tell, there hasn't been anyone else. It really all comes down to this obsession he's developed with my wife. She's blocked him on her phone, but the night he returned home, he set up a brand new email account just to reach her. The email started off as an apology but quickly spiraled. He rambled on, claiming he never got to finish at the restaurant that day, before launching into paragraph after paragraph about all the things he supposedly loves about my wife. He described some sort of desperate longing that led him down this path. Once again, he insisted there was a mutual attraction, claiming there was always unmistakable sexual tension between them. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he devoted an entire section to me. Let's just say I had no idea he held me in such contempt. He went on at length about how I wasn't satisfying my wife. The whole thing was surreal. We forwarded the email to my sister so her lawyer can see if maybe it'll be enough to get him officially removed from the house. As for my wife, she's not great, but she's doing a little bit better every day. She blames herself for being too comfortable around my brother-in-law. Usually, she's extremely careful about setting boundaries with other men. To be honest, my wife is stunning, and she's always gotten a lot of male attention. But with my brother-in-law, she let her guard down. He was family, she never believed the lines would be crossed. Thankfully, she and my sister remain on good terms, there's no resentment between them, and that makes me so grateful. We'll all be okay, eventually. It's just going to take time. Update 4. I thought the worst was behind us, but I was dead wrong. 3 weeks have passed since my last update, and just when things seemed to be settling down, everything exploded again. My sister had been doing well, she'd filed for divorce, was working with her lawyer on custody arrangements, and seemed genuinely relieved to be moving forward. The kids still didn't know the full story, but they were adjusting to their dad being around less, which honestly wasn't much different from before. Then last Tuesday happened. I was at work when my wife called me, hysterical. She could barely get the words out between sobs. Apparently, my brother-in-law had shown up at her office building. Not inside, he was smart enough to know that would probably get him arrested, but he was waiting by her car in the parking garage when she left for lunch. She said he looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. The moment she saw him, she turned around to go back inside, but he called out to her. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain. Against every instinct, she stopped. Maybe it was because she felt sorry for him, or maybe she just wanted this nightmare to end. He started crying immediately, telling her how he'd lost everything, how his kids barely looked at him, how my sister had cleaned out their joint accounts. Then he said something that made my blood freeze when she told me. I know you feel something too. I can see it in how you look at me when no one else is around. My wife told him he was delusional and started walking away, but then he grabbed her arm. Not hard, but enough to stop her. That's when he said the thing that's been eating at me for days, your husband doesn't know about the text you deleted. She pulled away and demanded to know what he was talking about. He claimed that back in January, she'd sent him a text late one night that she deleted before I could see it. Something about being lonely because I was working late again, and asking if he ever felt the same way in his marriage. Here's the thing, my wife swears this never happened. She looked me straight in the eye and told me she has never, not once, sent him anything remotely like that. But the detail he gave was so specific. He even mentioned it was on a Thursday night when I was working on the Henderson project, which I actually was. I want to believe her. Everything in my gut tells me she's telling the truth. But there's this tiny voice in the back of my head that won't shut up. Why would he make up something so specific? What would be the point now, when he's already lost everything? We went to the phone company to try to recover deleted texts from January, but they told us the data is only kept for 90 days. Convenient. But that's not even the worst part. Yesterday, my sister called me panicking. She'd found something else on his laptop, a folder buried deep in his files titled Project M. Inside were dozens of documents. Some were just rambling thoughts about my wife, but others were detailed plans. I'm talking spreadsheets tracking our schedules, notes about when I'd be out of town for work, even a list of my wife's favorite restaurants and the times she usually went there. The most disturbing one was titled Timeline. It laid out a months-long plan for how he was going to win her over. It started with increasing contact through family events, then moving to private conversations, and eventually creating situations where they'd be alone together. The final entry, dated just 2 days before he confessed to her, simply said, "Ready to make the move." She's been giving me signals all week. My sister printed everything and gave it to her lawyer. She thinks it might be enough to get a restraining order, maybe even full custody without visitation. As for my wife and me, things are tense. Not because I don't trust her, but because this whole situation has infected everything. She's second-guessing every interaction she's ever had with him, wondering if she somehow encouraged this without realizing it. I keep telling her it's not her fault, but I can see the doubt in her eyes, and if I'm being completely honest, I have moments where I wonder too. Not about her cheating, I know she didn't, but about whether there was something there that I missed. Some sign, some chemistry that everyone could see except me. Last night, she found me staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. and asked what I was thinking about. I told her the truth. I was trying to remember every family gathering, every group conversation, looking for clues I might have missed. She started crying and said she was doing the same thing. The worst part is, I don't think this is over. My sister says he's been asking around about our daily routines, trying to find out when we'll be at family events. My parents are starting to take sides. Dad thinks we should press charges. Mom thinks we should just try to move on for the sake of the kids. I don't know what happens next, but I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of him. And that scares the hell out of me. Update 5. I wish I could say things have gotten better, but they've somehow managed to get even worse. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I'm honestly not sure how much more of this my marriage can take. Last Monday started like any other day. My wife went to work, I dropped the kids at school, everything felt almost normal for the first time in months. Then around 3 p.m., I got a call from my wife's boss. My wife had never shown up after her lunch break, and they couldn't reach her. Her car was still in the parking garage, but she was nowhere to be found. I immediately called the police, but they said she had to be missing for 24 hours before they'd do anything unless there was evidence of foul play. I knew exactly where this was headed. I called my sister, and she confirmed my worst fear. Her husband hadn't come home the night before, and she had no idea where he was. The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. I was driving around town like a madman, calling everyone we knew, checking every place I could think of. My parents took the kids so I could focus on finding her. Around 9 p.m., my phone finally rang. It was my wife. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her, but she managed to tell me she was safe and gave me an address about an hour away. When I got there, it was a small motel off the highway. I found her in the parking lot, sitting on a curb with a police officer. Here's what happened. After leaving work for lunch, she'd gone to the grocery store. When she came out, my brother-in-law was waiting by her car again. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had his partner from the fire department with him, a guy named Mike who I'd met at family barbecues. Mike told her there had been an emergency with one of our kids at school, and they needed to drive her there immediately. In her panic, she got in their car without thinking. It wasn't until they were on the highway, going in the wrong direction, that she realized something was wrong. When she demanded they turn around, my brother-in-law finally broke down and admitted there was no emergency. He begged her to just listen to him, to give him one chance to explain everything properly, away from everyone else. That's when she realized Mike was in on it. He'd been feeding my brother-in-law information about our family, our schedules, everything. Apparently, Mike had been going through a messy divorce and my brother-in-law had convinced him that all wives were manipulative, that they needed to take control of the situation before their marriages ended up like Mike's. My wife said she'd never been so scared in her life. She kept demanding they take her back to her car, but my brother-in-law just kept talking, becoming more and more agitated. He told her he'd found the deleted text. Apparently he'd recovered it somehow from her old phone that she'd traded in last year. He kept waving a printed screenshot, insisting it proved she had feelings for him. She swears she still doesn't remember sending any text like that, but seeing it printed out shook her. She started doubting herself, wondering if maybe she had sent something during a weak moment that she'd forgotten about or blocked out. They drove her to that motel and got a room. Mike stayed in the car while my brother-in-law tried one last time to convince her they belonged together. He'd brought a bottle of wine, had this whole speech prepared about how they could start fresh somewhere else. The delusion was complete. He actually thought this kidnapping scheme would somehow win her over. When she refused and started screaming for help, he finally seemed to snap out of it. The reality of what he'd done hit him, and he completely broke down. He gave her his phone to call me, then just sat in the corner crying while she talked to the police. By the time I got there, both he and Mike were in custody. The police said they'd probably face kidnapping charges, possibly more. My wife spent hours giving her statement, and we didn't get home until after midnight. But here's the part that's really messing with my head. When we got home, my wife pulled me aside and showed me a photo on her phone. It was the screenshot he'd shown her of the supposed deleted text. It was sent from her number to his, dated January 15th at 11:47 p.m. The message read, "Do you ever feel trapped? Like you're living someone else's life? I keep thinking about our conversation today and wondering if you feel it too." She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I swear to God, I don't remember sending this. But it's my number, it's my way of texting. What if I did and just blocked it out because I felt guilty? I don't know what to think anymore." Part of me wonders if she's been hiding this one thing to protect me, to protect us. But another part of me thinks my brother-in-law is so obsessed, so technologically capable, that he could have faked it somehow. The police are looking into it, but they said these things can be manipulated pretty easily if you know what you're doing. The worst part is, I can see this doubt eating away at my wife. She started questioning everything about herself, wondering if she somehow encouraged this whole nightmare. Last night, she asked me if I thought she was a bad person for possibly sending that text. I told her that even if she did, it doesn't justify anything he's done, but I could see she didn't believe me. My sister is filing for full custody and a permanent restraining order. She says she never wants to see him again, and I don't blame her, but now my wife and I are left picking up the pieces of something that might not even be real. I keep staring at that screenshot, trying to figure out if it's real or not. And the horrible truth is, I'm not sure I want to know the answer. The arraignment is next week. I guess we'll see where this goes from here. Update 6. The arraignment was supposed to bring some closure, but instead it opened up a whole new nightmare that I never saw coming. My brother-in-law and Mike both pled not guilty, which wasn't surprising. What was surprising was what happened when I ran into Mike's ex-wife in the courthouse hallway. I'd never met Sarah before, but she recognized me from photos and introduced herself. What she told me made my stomach drop. According to Sarah, Mike had been obsessed with the idea that all marriages were doomed from the start. But it wasn't just philosophical. He'd apparently been collecting evidence of cheating wives for months, convinced that if he could prove all women were unfaithful, it would somehow vindicate his own failed marriage. She said he'd been taking photos of women in public, following couples, even going through people's trash looking for anything that could be twisted into evidence of affairs. Then she said something that made me feel sick. "He mentioned your wife specifically a few months ago. Said she was too friendly with men, that your brother-in-law was right to be suspicious." I thought he was just ranting, but now. I immediately called my wife and told her what Sarah had said. She went completely silent for almost a full minute before she whispered, "Oh my God. The gym." Apparently, back in February, she'd noticed someone taking pictures in the gym parking lot. She'd thought it was weird but figured it was someone documenting a car accident or something. Now she was wondering if it had been Mike, building his twisted case against her. But that's not even the worst part. 3 days after the arraignment, my sister called me in tears. She'd been going through more of her husband's stuff when she found a hidden phone, one of those cheap prepaid ones. The call history showed dozens of calls to a number she didn't recognize. When she called it, a woman answered. Turns out it was Mike's sister, Lisa, who lives about 2 hours away. And Lisa had some very interesting things to tell my sister. According to Lisa, Mike had been calling her regularly for months, telling her about his project to help his friend save his marriage. He'd convinced her that my brother-in-law's wife, my sister, was being manipulated by her best friend, my wife, into leaving him. Mike had painted this whole picture of my wife as some kind of master manipulator who was poisoning my sister's mind against her husband. But here's where it gets really twisted. Lisa said Mike had asked her to create fake social media accounts and reach out to my wife, pretending to be someone interested in fitness advice. The plan was to get my wife talking about her personal life, then twist whatever she said into evidence of infidelity. My wife immediately started going through her Instagram and Facebook messages from the past few months. Sure enough, there were 3 different accounts that had reached out to her, all women, all claiming to need workout advice, all eventually steering conversations toward marriage and relationships. Looking back at the messages, it was obvious they were fishing for information. Questions like, do you ever feel unappreciated by your husband? And have you ever been tempted by someone else? My wife had answered honestly but innocently, talking about normal marriage challenges and admitting that, yes, she'd found other men attractive before but would never act on it. Those conversations had been screenshotted and sent to Mike, who had apparently been sharing them with my brother-in-law as proof that my wife was unhappy in our marriage and looking for an escape. The fake text from January? Lisa finally admitted that Mike had created it using some app that lets you generate fake message screenshots. He'd based the wording on things my wife had said in those manipulated social media conversations. When I told my wife, she broke down completely. Not because she was relieved, which I thought she would be, but because she was horrified at how her words had been twisted. She kept saying, what if I gave them exactly what they needed? What if I said something that made them think they could do this? I tried to comfort her, but honestly, I was struggling too, not because I doubted her, but because the elaborate nature of this whole scheme was starting to sink in. These weren't just 2 guys who'd lost their minds, this was months of planning, manipulation, and stalking. The police are treating it as a much more serious case now. They've seized both phones and are working with the FBI's cybercrime unit because of the fake social media accounts. The prosecutor thinks they might be looking at additional charges related to harassment and identity theft, but the damage to my wife is already done. She stopped going to the gym, barely leaves the house except for work, and has deleted all her social media accounts. Last night, she asked me if I thought we should move to another state, start completely over somewhere else. The scary part is, I'm actually considering it. Not because I think we need to run, but because I'm not sure my wife will ever feel safe here again. And honestly, I'm not sure I will either. My sister's doing better than expected. She said finding out about the elaborate scheme actually helped her, because now she knows for certain that her husband didn't just develop feelings, he actively participated in a months-long campaign to destroy multiple families. The kids still don't know the full truth, but they've started asking questions about why Daddy doesn't live with them anymore and why we don't see Uncle Mike at family gatherings. I have no idea what we're going to tell them. The preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. Our lawyer says with Lisa's testimony and the evidence from the fake social media accounts, we should be able to get restraining orders against both of them. But I can't shake the feeling that this still isn't over. Yesterday, I found my wife sitting in our bedroom, staring at her phone. When I asked what she was looking at, she showed me a friend request from a profile with no picture and a generic name. The account had been created the day before. We immediately forwarded it to the police, but the message was clear: someone is still watching, still trying to get to her. I used to think the worst thing that could happen was my brother-in-law destroying our family. Now I'm realizing that might have just been the beginning.